Amen. Well, happy Mother's Day to all of you here today and all watching online now or maybe later. Happy Mother's Day, Mom.
Happy Mother's Day.
If you, I haven't given her a gift as of this moment. It is at home, and I will give it to her at lunch today when we can FaceTime my sister, who will also participate in the gift giving. So I can't tell you what I got her, but I did give her flowers. And
yes, they're beautiful.
They're so pretty, and she's allowed us to use them for our backdrop this Mother's Day. And it is beautiful. Thank you to Cassie and Diane for helping create our beautiful Mother's Day backdrop.
Awesome.
It's beautiful. Okay, well, I'm honored to have my mom here, not just here with us because they call this their home church, but you know, because you're here every week, that they travel a lot. So they're not always here. But I'm excited that you are here on Mother's Day, but then also that you're going to share with me and do this with me. And so I thought that would be a fun treat for everybody, and it's also a gift to me. And because it's Mother's Day, we thought we'd sit.
Are you nervous?
No, are you?
Are you nervous I'll say something?
Well, now I am. I wasn't, but now a little bit.
What do you want to know?
Everyone knows in the back where the mute button is, correct? If necessary. Listen, we are going to stay in our series this morning all about Imperfect Heroes. And we learned about Jonah, and we learned that he was an absolute hot mess, right? Jonah was a hot mess, and he was still called an imperfect hero. And we learned about Samson last week and how God's purpose is not changed by your past. And so this morning, I want us to look at the story of Naomi and Ruth. And this is something that means a lot to both my mom and myself. We have a mentoring program for young women in ministry, or just women in ministry, really, called the Naomi Ruth Project. And so our journey, and we value the mentorship between Naomi and Ruth. But today, for the sake of Mother's Day, our focus is going to be on Naomi, okay? And so we want to share with you the story of Ruth and Naomi.
Okay, I get to share the background, the backdrop for today. And I will not be going off script like Troy. I'm going to stick very close. However, let me just put this little addendum. My daughter created the notes in like font point 4. And I need them in like 50, 58.
We borrow some reading glasses, anyone?
So forgive me if I'm squinting any at all, but let's just look at the story of Naomi and Ruth. There was a great famine in Israel during the time of the judges, and many people were relocating to foreign lands to find food for their family. But there was a man in Bethlehem named Elimelech.
You did it.
I did it.
Elimelech.
Took his wife Naomi and his 2 sons, which I will not say their names, and they went to Moab. Do you know where Moab is? Anybody? That's the modern day Jordin that butts up next to Israel. We've been there. It's so
just
cool.
Recently.
Cool. So they go there to find food, and then they end up just staying there. Then Elimelech dies. I know. I'm so impressed. Y'all, I struggled with that yesterday so bad. And so now I can't say. So Naomi stays in the land with her 2 sons, but they end up marrying Moabite women named Orpah and Ruth. Eventually, dad dies, the husband dies, and the 2 sons pass away. So there's Naomi in a foreign land with 2 Moabite daughter-in-laws. Then Naomi hears that back home in Bethlehem in Israel, that food is plentiful and provided. And she decides, I'm going back to Bethlehem in Judah, and told Orpah and Ruth to stay in Moab and find new husbands. I thought that was pretty nice of her, huh? Orpah says, okay, I will. I'm going back to my mom. I'm going back to mom's home. But Ruth says, I'm staying with you. She actually says, your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. So they go back to Bethlehem, and Ruth decides to go into the fields, which was a custom then for the poor or the widows, people that couldn't provide for themselves. And it was the barley harvest. And so she's picking up leftover grains on the ground. And Ruth worked behind the harvesters that belonged to in the land that belonged to a man named Boaz, who was a relative of the father-in-law, Elimelech. So Boaz heard that Naomi had returned with Ruth and that Ruth was gleaning from the field. And he went to Ruth and told her she could have as much grain as she wanted, and that she could go and drink the water from the jars when she was thirsty. Ruth questions his kindness towards her, and he says, it's because of your kindness to Naomi that the Lord of God of Israel is blessing and rewarding you. Wow. So Ruth works very hard in the fields, provides enough barley to sell and keep them alive. And after the harvest, Naomi tells Ruth, go meet Boaz on the threshing floor and lie at his feet when he's done working. Then Boaz wakes up and he sees her there, and he blesses her for her kindness and her noble character. Mm-hmm. Then Boaz gave 6 measures of barley. I'm assuming that was a lot. And tells her to take it home to Naomi. Boaz then goes before his friends and elders, and he purchased that land that Naomi's husband had, Elimelech, which is his relative. He did that so he could acquire Naomi and Ruth. Boaz was now able to marry Ruth. Boaz and Ruth had a son. You following me? Obed, and a grandson named Jesse, who would be the father of David, and from whose genealogy would come Jesus Christ. That's your backdrop.
That's incredible. So Naomi and her husband, they have 2 sons and 2 daughter-in-laws, and they go into this new land. While they're there, her husband dies, and then her 2 sons die. Remember, they left Bethlehem to go to Moab because they were trying to escape death. And so it happens regardless. And Naomi tells her daughter-in-laws that they should go back home. Mm-hmm. Orpah does. And that was really actually an accepted thing for them. Yeah. Like that was a normal practice. My son is gone. I don't have another son for you to marry, which is strange to us today. But I don't have another son for you to marry, so you're released. You can go back home and remarry. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's interesting because obviously we know that Ruth stayed with her, but I think it's interesting that what would have looked different in this story? Historically, what would have looked different if Ruth hadn't made that decision and that choice to stay with Naomi?
I think Ruth probably would have stayed in Moab and remarried and lived happily ever after. Yeah. But Naomi, however, would have died probably alone. Mm-hmm. But because Ruth honored her mother-in-law, things turned out very differently for each of them and for each of us. There's no doubt in my mind that Jesus would have come to earth, but perhaps their imperfect lives would not have been part of a perfect story.
That's good. So for one, Naomi didn't have to live alone. Mm-mm. She didn't have to die alone with no family. And Ruth meets her Redeemer Boaz and eventually provides a grandchild for Naomi. Grandchildren are pretty awesome, I hear.
They're pretty awesome. You're welcome.
No, you're welcome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hold on. You're welcome. She provides this grandchild for Naomi, and Ruth honors Naomi just in her choice to stay. It's not a simple choice, but it was her choice to make. Honor has a way of trickling down from generation to generation. You need to hear that this morning. Because of the actions of one woman, one choice, the lineage of Jesus Christ was born. I think that's pretty amazing. One choice of honor affected history.
Yeah.
What does that speak to us today? One choice.
Make good choices.
Can children listen closely, honor your father and mother, and make good choices?
Yes.
Make good choices. It could affect history. You'd never know. She did not know that in that moment what that choice would what would come about from that choice. It's incredible. Ruth chose to honor Naomi, but today I want us to look at Naomi. I want us to honor her as an imperfect hero. And here's something that I wrote down. We don't really have a picture of Naomi being an imperfect person. We're not looking at Naomi and trying to pick apart who she was or her character. She seemed to be a pretty incredible woman, but she had an imperfect life. There was nothing about the situation that was presented to her that was perfect. And I think that's important for us to get a hold of and grasp this morning, because we can all agree that her life and the things she had to walk with were full of imperfection, and they were full of hardship.
I would agree. Most of us have someone in our lives, whether it's a grandma, a mom, or a woman of influence, or we are a grandma, a mom, or a woman of influence, much like Naomi. And these people have shaped who we've become as a person. Some of us would not be who we are without their voices, without them telling us you can make it. My mom used to say, "Girl, pick yourself up by the bootstraps." Anybody heard that saying? Just me? Yeah. At first I was like, what? But they wiped our tears and they told us we can make it. They corrected us when we were wrong. Just a few times, Jordin. It's okay. Mothers hand down to us our faith and that concept of with God, all things are possible.
Yeah.
They love us conditionally, no matter what.
Unconditionally.
Unconditionally. Well, maybe
You love us conditionally?
I love you conditionally, no matter what. Something like that. But as I reflect on my mom, her mother and her relationship was pretty imperfect, if you will. But my my grandmother, passed down her faith in Jesus Christ. Then my mom passed down to me and my siblings, and then corrected a few things along the way, and hopefully I did that as well. My mom was an imperfect hero, no doubt.
Yeah.
But no person is perfect aside from Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. None of us, even moms. But her love for the Lord was passed on, and I know there's times that, shocker, I didn't honor my mom. If there's one thing I could go back and do, I would change that. But honor can be given through repentance. We can go back and say, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
Right? I've had to tell you I'm sorry a few times. And hopefully my transparency has helped you. And I see that it has, because I can see now her living that out with her children and then their children. It's going to go on from generation to generation. Not perfection, but just that faith in God and that love and that transparency and ability to say, I'm an imperfect hero, if you will, and you can be one too. And I see it in Abby and my grandkids for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important that we remember today, as we all sit here, that we have the opportunity to make that choice for ourselves. And I think we were talking yesterday a little bit, today, the influence that comes from mothers or motherly figures, it's not always your mother, right? That is that influence in your life. But that motherly figure, those things are necessary.
For sure.
And so we have an opportunity as women today, men, sorry, you have the same thing as a man, but we're speaking to the women, to the moms. You have an opportunity to influence people around you. Whether you have someone that calls you mom or not, whether you have a mother that you look up to in that way or not, you have that influence. And we get to choose for ourselves what that looks like in our lives.
We don't have to be perfect to do that.
No, we can't be perfect.
No.
And the more we strive for perfection, the more imperfect we realize we are. And probably others around us. We can be the ones that start patterns. We can be, if you're here today and you say, you know what, there's some patterns that we need to stop. You get to be that person that stops a pattern in your life or in your family that you don't want to pass on. And you have the ability to pass on the good, the
Yes.
good things.
Yeah, so that's what Naomi did, an imperfect hero. She endured the hardships, but her faith in God was so obvious that it was birthed and passed on to Ruth. Why else would she say, where you go, I'll go. Your people will be my people. I mean, she's given up her land, her home, her culture, her religion. She's giving up everything, and she's going to a foreign land. She's going back to Judah, and just really basically to take care of Naomi.
Yeah.
I love the way we were talking about this yesterday, how God was just weaving their stories together. Isn't it beautiful? That's what he's doing with us.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, never underestimate, and I think we do. I think we get caught up in just routine. This is Sunday, this is how Sundays look, this is what we do. It's Monday. Boo, Mondays, right? It's Tuesday, it feels like a Monday. It's Wednesday, why isn't it Friday? And we get in these routines and we get stuck. Mm-hmm. But it's important for us to remember and keep our focus on Jesus because he is weaving things together. The relationships that you make, they're not on accident. No matter what you may think, your steps are ordered. And so you have to remember today, do not take lightly your daily choices, the conversation that you have with a patient, the conversation you have with a client or a parent or whatever it is that your field, it looks like. Everything about our lives, God's weaving for a perfect plan.
It's an imperfect life with a perfect plan.
And a perfect God.
And a perfect God.
We still have to keep our focus on Jesus and his love for us. And we being so incredibly imperfect, we didn't merit that love. But he gave that to us freely. And I thought there's nothing like Mother's Day to paint that picture because I know that your kids are so perfect because I've seen your kids and they just are perfect all the time. My kids are not perfect.
Well, I heard this just this week. Help me, Tim. The one thing that grandparents and grandkids have in common, they have a common enemy, the parents.
That's
I
messed
love
up.
that.
Wow. Wait, that means that Nani and I have the same.
Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Interesting.
You guys could chat a while.
Listen, motherhood is far from easy. And some days are harder than others, but I have heard it said, and I truly believe this. If you're a mom in the room, I think that we can all agree with a giant amen, and hopefully no tears shed. But it can be the hardest job in the world.
Absolutely.
Motherhood can be the hardest job in the world if you're doing it right. And I think you need to remember that on the days where motherhood feels overwhelming and it feels all-consuming and you feel like you're failing, you're probably doing it right. And I think you need to hear that this morning. I want us to look, though, at how God works at blessing the faithfulness of mothers who serve him in the midst of imperfection, because Naomi's life was not perfect. It didn't go the way that she thought it should. She had to leave home and everything that she knew. She left her friends. We don't even take into account all of the details that were there. Maybe a business, maybe a family home that was passed down. There's so much that goes into it. And she had to walk away from all of that to go to a new place. And she had to essentially start over. And God blessed her faithfulness by giving her these 2 daughter-in-laws. And then one that would change her life. She wasn't blood. It's not always a blood relative that comes in and changes your life, but thank God for Ruth. Boaz turned an uncertain future for Naomi into a promised future for us. I'm going to say that again. This Redeemer for Naomi and for Ruth, he turned an uncertain future into a promised future for you and for me. And all because of the faithfulness of God, but the faithfulness of Naomi to say, we're going to just keep moving forward. We're going to keep doing this.
Sometimes that's all we can do. Just keep moving forward. You think you're not an influence. You think, how can I impact someone else's life? But you do, just by putting one foot in front of the other.
It's so true.